Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. So today we are going to talk about another geopolitical occurrence, something that has happened because of Russia's actions in Ukraine. And I've got a message, and this isn't really a question. It's a statement, but it's something that we should definitely acknowledge and kind of talk about when we're discussing how Russia's behavior has impacted the global scene. As an Eastern European, I always felt that the newer former Eastern Bloc NATO members were second-hand members, and that NATO was still going to use them as a buffer because all the actual troops were still in their Cold War positions. With hundreds of thousands of troops moving to actual eastern border inside former Eastern Bloc NATO members, now I feel like NATO is considering them equal members, or at least will make a genuine effort to defend the territorial integrity, instead of just letting Russians exhaust themselves on NATO soil like they did in Ukraine. This alone is a big loss for Russia, and I'm genuinely thankful to Putin for pushing this issue and forcing NATO to show they'll defend my country. Yes. No notes here. Yeah, that happened. And to be honest, your feelings about prior, probably pretty true, pretty accurate. It's not that NATO would have just left the newer members of NATO, just hanging out to dry. But an inherent part of war is absorbing the first hit. When you're talking about something that is supposed to and has traditionally behaved as a defensive alliance. Remember, you have to separate NATO, the alliance, from NATO members who definitely don't behave in a defensive manner at all times. If you look to Germany during the Cold War or South Korea, there are locations where NATO members, where U.S. troops are, and they even refer to themselves as this in some situations, speed bumps or tripwires. They know, because they're familiar with how many forces they have on their side, they know they can't win. They're there to absorb that first hit and give the rest of NATO time to respond. Because NATO didn't want to be perceived as provoking Russia, they did. They stayed in those Cold War era positions, which means the newer members of NATO, they very much were the new speed bumps, the tripwires, there to buy time for NATO to respond and then eventually take that territory back. With the Russian move into Ukraine, there was no longer a worry about the perception of provoking Russia. So troop positions started to move. And because of the behavior of the newer NATO members, when the time came and NATO was like, we're going to assist Ukraine on this one, almost every single one of the new members of NATO was like, yeah, let's do that. They didn't hesitate. They saw the importance geopolitically. So the message that came in, yeah, I mean, that's exactly, it's accurate. The feelings, the perceptions described in that message, they are accurate. Prior to this, yeah, most of the newer members of NATO, they were the speed bumps, the tripwires, the sacrificial area that was going to have to be retaken later. Because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, those troop positions have changed. And there are a lot more assets that have moved further east that would be able to, well, especially now that we have seen the Russian military perform, would be able to fend off an attack. So there's not much to discuss here. The message is correct. But it's important to count this among the geopolitical failings when we talk about the stealing of the resolve of NATO. We can't underestimate or undervalue the other side of that. For the older members of NATO, we got to see newer members act like NATO. For the newer members of NATO, they got to feel like they were actually part of NATO for kind of the first time. And that definitely strengthens NATO's hand to the detriment of Russia. That is one more thing. When you were talking about that international poker game where everybody's cheating, it is one more card that Russia got dealt that doesn't go with anything else in its hand. Anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.